support essential pollinators as well as other wildlife, and also learn how to identify, not necessarily how, but identify invasive species, and so you can remove and replace them with easy care native plants. And so we'll focus on something like my 14 favorite perennials at the end of the talk. I'll also talk about how you can have your garden recognized and certified by the National Wildlife Federation. So that's a program that I started last year as part of the Environmental Commission's called Nature Amendments. That's the little purple brochure. So we're joined with Mendham Borough as well. So we're now trying to get both towns certified by the National Wildlife Federation. And that means individual homeowners, each property that certifies is worth 1 point. So the total population for both towns, we need 175 points to be certified as a community wildlife habitat. So schools are 5 points, municipal or town property is 3. So we're up to about 75-ish points or so. So we're on our way, but we've got still about 100 points to go. So part of this talk, we'll talk about how you can certify and be part of this project. I've always been interested in gardening, but over the past 8 years or so, I've become aware of the value of planting with native plants. Supporting the whole life cycle of butterflies by planting the plants that support the caterpillars that eventually grow up into butterflies, but the caterpillars are the essential food for baby birds. So if we want birds in our yard, if we want butterflies, we have to have the plants that support them. I was fortunate enough to hear Professor Doug Tallamy speak. I don't know if anyone's heard of him before. He's kind of the native plant guru. He's an entomologist from the University of Delaware, and he studies kind of species interactions. So his papers have kind of documented how many caterpillars are on certain plant species, and just documented that they only exist on these species, they don't exist on the non-native species. He has wonderful talks on YouTube, so if you want to hear one of his talks, he also has best-selling books. I think the library has them as well, called Nature's Best Hope, that basically just outlines his whole thesis about how native plants support the environment and ecosystem. And his project is called Homegrown National Park. So national parks are not going to cut it in terms of making enough space for wildlife to exist. Like 80% of property in the US is privately owned. So if we want to have an impact on supporting wildlife, we have to start in our own backyards. And that's kind of powerful. Like I find it, exciting that I can have an impact in my own backyard and get overwhelmed with all the environmental issues happening. And so it feels great that you can change just what's happening in your own backyard. Planting native plants is easy. I wish finding them were more so. It's getting better, but a lot of nurseries don't have a great selection, or if they do, like Great Swamp, good selection, but they have a lot of cultivars, which that's anything you see in quotes. So it's like the native name and then something in quotes, which just means it's cultivated to be bred for certain characteristics. Maybe plant, flower color, could be leaf color, could be height, could be disease resistance, anything. That's not necessarily bad, but there hasn't been enough research to know how those cultivars support, if they support native species enough as the native species. So it's recommended to try to find the straight species if you can, but it's difficult because, I contact Great Swamp and they say they want more straight species. They don't sell. I'm like, but they do. You just need to buy. They think they're messier looking or not quite as, suited to the home habitat. I don't know. That's the line they give me when I emailed them, and they've been, but it's coming. There are enough people demanding this, so I think it will only just change. And actually, there was new legislation last year in the New Jersey state to support a Jersey Natives program, to actually, like you've seen the Jersey Grown signs. So soon, nurseries will eventually have labels on plants saying like Jersey Native. So not just a native plant, but a Jersey Native plant. So, and there's supposed to be support to nurseries as part of this program. It's been kind of slow going. I haven't seen it in the nurseries yet. There's supposed to be a license plate. I'm eager for that. I want a license plate. But that's, and there's another bill up that hasn't passed yet, but it's actually going to ban certain invasive species. New Jersey is like one of the only states in the Northeast region that does not ban certain invasive species like Japanese barberry and burning bush and all these ones that are already widespread. So kind of the horse has already left the barn, but we still should get on board with the rest and ban those there. But, I'll show you at the end, there's numerous, and actually on the back of that flyer of the brochure, there's numerous mail order options and options that are about an hour away. I just went to Bowman's Hill last weekend of their opening, their opening weekend. It's a great trip just outside of New Hope. Gino's Nursery is 10 minutes from them, so I kind of do both of them at once. And Gino's is an in-person nursery. Bowman's Hill is actually a wildflower preserve. It costs money to go in. You could become a member and get a 10% discount on plants. That's what I did this year. And then they have a great nursery and they grow all their own stuff as well. So those are two I highly recommend. Okay, so let me go through. Okay, so this is going to be complicated with my phone. Okay. All right, there we go. So as I said, the Mendham Township and Mendham Borough are working in partnership with Wild Birds Unlimited, which is in Denville, are working to certify the towns as community wildlife habitat, both with National Wildlife Federation and New Jersey Audubon, who's the local partner. And New Jersey Audubon is actually having a sale. They have 2 native plant sales a year. On May 6th at 10 a.m., they're having their spring sale, and they always have one in the fall as well.
Where was that? Where is that going to be?
That's at the Bernardsville Center, the Sherman Hoffman Wildlife Center. It's New Jersey Audubon. There's Sherman Hoffman Center there. So we were inspired by Washington Township. I actually saw an article in the Observer Tribune right after I joined the Environmental Commission. They had joined this program. And Lambertville, I saw their success story. They actually got certified in 2 years. So I don't think we're going to be as fast, but anyway, we're going to get there eventually. But we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page there. And these are some upcoming events. So I hope you had a chance to buy some plants in the sale. It's mostly sold out now, but the Great Swamp is the 3rd year we have been a partner with the Great Swamp. They do a sale of plugs. So plugs are small, like 3-inch kind of landscape plugs that are cheaper than a big perennial. They're about like $3 each. They sell them like in a grouping of 5. So you get 5 plugs per species for like $15 in it. So you can either do individual species or they had like kits. So like a dry sunny kit or a sidewalk kit. So if you didn't get it this time, there will be one next year, and there are still some available. That's the website, and local pickup is May 6th, so next Saturday, just at the municipal building parking lot, so I'll be there with the plants that you can grab. Another great thing to be aware of is if you want more information, New Jersey Native Plant Society, really cheap $20 membership, but free. They also have monthly webinar series, so you can just look on their website. I think they're having one tonight. Can't go to that one tonight, but the next one will be like in a month's time. This Saturday, the Sharing Project. If you haven't heard of the Sharing Project, that was started by high school students, and it's actually out on Mount Pleasant Road. And they have a community garden growing food that they donate to local food shelters. Yeah, and they have some native plants out there too, and the Environmental Commission sponsors them. And so they're doing their annual Earth Day kind of event at the Brookside Community Club and Field on Saturday. So I'm going to be there just handing out Nature Amendment brochures and talking to people. They have fun activities for the kids and things there. And then as part of the Environmental Commission, last year I did a garden tour at my house in September and also had Toadshade Wildflower Farm there, which is a native plant grower in Frenchtown, has been in business 30 years. It's mail order only unless you want to pick up in Frenchtown. You can, it's the Frenchtown hardware stores where the pickup place is. And she sometimes does Frenchtown farmers markets as well. So that's also a summer pickup place. But she will be there in person selling plants at my house. I haven't actually booked the date, that's why I said September, but we agreed we'd do it again. So we're going to do another one. So it was very successful last year, so probably mid-September that will be coming up. Okay, so let me just get my things together. So why is this important? You know, wildlife and biodiversity are globally in decline, and wildlife rely on plants for survival. Without healthy, diverse plant communities, wildlife can't continue to survive. So as I said before, insects are really critical to this, and 90% of the insects that rely on plants can only do so with the plant they evolved. So the most famous example is monarchs and milkweed. So monarchs can't exist without milkweed. Varieties of milkweed, okay, but it has to be milkweed. That's the only thing. Milkweed is very toxic. So like insects, they evolve over millennia to be able to combat a certain toxin in plants. Plants don't want to be eaten, so they put out these toxins, and all the, certain plants can be eaten by certain insects. So you have to have a variety of them to support the native pollinators. Another example from New Jersey is our state flower. It's actually the violet. A lot of people think of it as a weed. I love it. It's my favorite native ground cover. I can't get enough. I've never planted a violet in my life. Lucky enough that there's tons there. If they're in a place, in a garden bed where I want to plant them, I just move them somewhere else. Like tons of bare area where I'm like, I need more violets. But violet is the host plant for the fritillary butterfly. So you can look up what each plant you're looking into, what it is a host plant for. So there's some that are very specific. Some can support lots of different ones. Just some definitions. Native is native to the region, so the straight species, non-cultivated. Native cultivar, that's anything in quotes. It's been changed in some way. Some of them are not so bad, like the colors of the different echinacea, so like the purple coneflower, some are white or some are red, that's not as bad, but if the ones that have the double flower, where the bee basically can't get in there at all, there's no pollen, that's been changed too much. And ones that change the color of the leaf, like purple, that is changed too much. That seems to be something that the insects just can't adapt to. It has to be, but like something like height or like that's not really a big deal. But anyway, safer is just stick to the straight species when you can. Introduced is brought to the region like daffodils, but won't spread, not doing any harm. Invasive is brought to the region, but will readily spread. It's like Japanese barberry. So why invasive? Why native? They are more adaptive to the region, to the local soil. Local climate, weather patterns, rainfall levels, soil moisture. With the first year, you need to water. But after that, they're really well adapted to the local climate. So they don't need as much watering year after year. The new garden we just planted in Wysong Park, last year we watered every week. This year, I'm not planning to. I'm going to go check on it, but it really should be okay. And they also, they don't need any pesticides or fertilizers. In fact, you'll kill what you're trying to develop. Fertilizers will they don't need that as well. It provides green infrastructure by doing stormwater runoff. You can make a rain garden if you have a really wet area and create like a buffer to help for infrastructure. This is from Doug Tallamy's research. So the oak is known as a keystone species. He has a whole book on this called The Nature of Oaks. And so he's documented by going out and looking and documenting in his own yard. He has a 10-acre property in Delaware where he's done a conversion. It was like mowed for hay. And he's put tons of natives in and taken out invasive species, and it's gone around and documented. So the oak supports over 500 species of caterpillar. The ginkgo, which I have one of these in my yard, it's a pretty tree, doing its duty with carbon, and it's a tree, but it doesn't, no caterpillar in this area can eat it. So it just doesn't support the life cycle in that way. So, the act of planting for a purpose is the definition of gardening. So, native plants is, to me, just makes gardening more impactful. So in terms of what we need to do to certify your yard for the National Wildlife Federation is these categories. So we have water, food, and you need 3 different types of plants or feeders. Native plants pretty much do the duty. So there's like fruit, there's like berries, there's sap, there's pollen. Like native plants kind of cover it all. You can have supplemental feeders, like I have that in the winter, but I just read an article today that it's kind of just like, it's like a little snack. Like it's not the main thing that birds need, but it's like for winter it gets them through. But for the main, they need caterpillars. They need that. That's like their primary source. Hummingbirds need nectars. Bees and butterflies need nectar. In terms of water, this is kind of the hardest for a lot of people, but bird bath is fine. And if you're worried about mosquitoes, Doug Tallamy's thing is to just use mosquito dunks. you can either get them in like a circle form or like pellets, and I just sprinkle a few in the bird bath, and that just kills the mosquito larvae. It's not harmful to birds, it doesn't hurt anything else, doesn't harmful to fish. And so, or you can either do that or just clean it out every few days. But yeah, and cover, basically this is just native plants again. Oops. So cover is just, plants or mature trees, places to raise young. So the same plants that provide the food can do double duty for cover and places to raise young. And sustainable gardening is one of the most important ones too. Just not spraying toxic pesticides, not ruining what you're going through all this effort to provide food for. You can't then put pesticides on them, and using organic gardening techniques, conserving water, not planting anything invasive or non-native, and planting native species instead.
What do you do about leaves?
Oh, you leave the leaves as well. So leaves provide mulch. So if you can, I rake as many leaves. I have a lot of trees. Too many leaves than I could possibly use, but I rake what I can into the garden beds, and then mulch all the others on the grass because it will kill the grass. But you can leave them in the garden beds, and it provides an essential layer of natural mulch and insulation. The plants come up perfectly well. They don't have a problem. They do that in nature, so they come up. And the stems as well. I've just now started breaking or cutting the stems like 6 to 18 inches. And that because stems provide habitat for nesting bees. So, and they kind of like a 3-year cycle. So they either are in there now and then might emerge, or they might be in there for the next year, and then you kind of leave them there, and then they can, if it's a hollow one, they can go in and lay their eggs in there and use it as habitat. And it also provides free stakes. I have a lot of tall, floppy things, and so a lot of mine fell over, and I couldn't actually leave them because they were just like on the ground. But where they were there, they're like, instead of putting up bamboo stakes to make them stay up. Okay, so yeah, this is just more about, and this is from Doug Tallamy's research again, that, basically one nest is 6,000 to 8,000 caterpillars. And, this is an example of what we see probably too much, just what is normal. But it doesn't have to be take over the whole lawn. You can start small. It seems overwhelming. You're like, what do? You can just start small. Like the ratio Doug Tallamy uses is it should ideally be 70% of your property. I don't think I'm there yet. I've been doing this for years. Like I have too many invasives that were planted a long time ago or non-natives. But you just start with one small garden, and you can still have enough grass for play in or to use as well. So this is what you can get if you want. It's $20 to certify, and then if you want to pay a little more, I think $30 more, you can get a sign as well. So I have one in front of my yard just to show the neighbors and people walking by what I'm doing. Okay, so if you want to know exactly what invasive plant is, that is the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team's website. So they have the definitive list. I didn't have any copies with me, but you can go to that site, and they update it every year with what is an invasive species. And they list them from widespread to emerging. So, and what's commonly available for sale at nurseries and what's not commonly available. So you can kind of see both lists. So it's hard. I planted Japanese spireas before I got into this whole kick because the garden center said they were great for bees and they're fabulous and lovely to look at. But I pulled them out a few years ago because they're on the emerging invasive species list. I don't see them in the woods yet, but if they're emerging, I just didn't want to still have them in my yard if they eventually will become invasive. So it's hard because you don't necessarily see everything. Like a common one is butterfly bush, what a lot of people have. They're like, well, I don't see it escaping, but when birds take the seed and then drop it somewhere else, you don't necessarily see. And it might just become emerging when our temperatures warm a little bit. It's definitely an invasive species further south, so it's kind of like common. So some common invasive plants in New Jersey, ground covers like English ivy and vinca, grass, see miscanthus all the time. It's really pretty grass, but that does escape quite easily. Shrubs like Japanese barberry, burning bush, butterfly bush, privet. Vines like Japanese honeysuckle, that's everywhere. Trees like Norway maple, Callery pear, that one was just in bloom. It looks beautiful, but it spreads like wildfire. And actually some states like South Carolina actually has a bounty out on a Callery pears and will give the homeowner money to replace it because it's gotten so bad there that that's what they're doing. But yeah, and even Japanese maple. I was surprised about that. I have a lot of Japanese maple in my yard. That is emerging. So it's not widespread yet, but you know, and it's not as, it doesn't travel as far. So like I see tons of seedlings in my own yard, but it doesn't kind of go the distance. So I'm not going to chop mine down. I have a big Norway maple too. Again, like that's widespread. That's everywhere. But so you just do what you can. You don't have to get rid of everything, but it's just, I got rid of all my barberries. I had a burning bush. I got rid of that. Privet, I never planted, but it pops up for neighbors. So I've been getting rid of that. Eventually, I'm going to get rid of the English ivy. That's going to take a little longer. So what to plant instead? So in terms of vines, you can do evergreen ferns. So I have some Christmas ferns, not as many as I'd like. They don't spread. I wish they would, but they're beautiful and they're evergreen. So it's those Christmas ferns. They're green all year round. They kind of go dormant and look a little ugly during the winter, but then the new shoots come up again in the spring. And wood fern is also evergreen. I don't have that one. I do have a ton of ostrich ferns. So like my dad,
Hundreds.
hundreds now. You started out with how many?
I started out with 12 from the crosses.
12. They have multiplied readily, and so that's a good thing. They spread really quick, and yeah, you can dig them up where you don't want them, but yeah, they provide a nice ground cover. And all ferns and sedges are deer resistant. So more native ground covers. I'm just starting to get into the sedges. I tried a little bit of the Carex Pennsylvania last year. I have a few little tufts of it in a shady area. A few came back this year, so I'm going to see if that spreads. But it could be almost like a grass replacement. It's quite long, so anyway, I haven't really experimented with that one. But foam flower, I love. I wish it spread more. I think it can in certain areas, but I think my chipmunks dug mine up this year. Like, it was going great for years, and then, anyway. But it does spread. I have a picture of that one later, and some places where you can find them. Golden ragwort is my new favorite one. That one spreads a lot, so make sure where you want to put it, you're okay with that. Some people don't like that, but if you're going for a ground cover, and it's pretty evergreen too. Right now it's blooming, so that's where it has tall yellow flowers. And then I started out with 4 plugs 2 years ago. And now I have a section that's kind of like maybe 3 by 5 foot that's kind of taken over. And I keep moving it to other areas where I'd like it to be.
Does it when it competes with grass, or does the grass win?
I haven't seen that yet. Not sure. Do you want it to compete with the grass?
I want to kill my grass.
You want to kill the grass? I would kill the grass first. Yeah.
I'm sure I can help.
I tried last year with the drought and I was not successful.
Yeah, I would probably, if you have an area where you have grass that you don't want it, what we did at Wysong Park was we just did, we covered it with newspaper and then mulch on top. So it was like we did sheet mulch. So it's an easy way to kill grass, and then you can plant directly in it. So it takes like about a month. So you have to do it either in the winter or early spring. But now you could just dig up the grass if you want. I've done that too. You can just lift it up. But it probably would spread into the grass. I haven't seen it yet in my property, but
Talk about moss.
I don't know much about moss yet. Anyway. Virginia strawberry, I have not used that one yet just because I have so much of the invasive strawberry. So I feel like I wouldn't know the difference, but the invasive strawberry is a yellow flower. The native strawberry is a white flower. And I think has much like bigger leaves. So it is a nice ground cover. I just haven't used it yet because I feel like I want to get rid of the invasive strawberry. But violets, I have all those. Like I said, I've never planted violet. They're just everywhere. So you've heard of no mow May, so yeah, I'm not gonna mow until the violets have done their thing, and so they're out there. I have like purple and white ones, so they're just everywhere in the grass and my ground covering garden beds as well. And wild ginger is one I wish would spread more. That's very slow spreading. It's not evergreen. The European ginger is evergreen, but I wouldn't recommend that one. But the wild ginger is gorgeous when it comes up, and a great kind of ground cover. It kind of looks like a violet. It's about like this big in leaves. Okay, so in terms of what to plant instead of butterfly bush, Joe Pye weed is one I just planted last year. Very tall, so like 6 to 8 feet. So kind of back of the garden, but it is a butterfly magnet, just kind of like the butterfly bush. And the yellow swallowtail kind of loves the nectar. Moist to average, so it doesn't necessarily need moist, and it can be full to partial sun. And it's July through September, so it's a long bloom period. Okay, instead of burning bush, what I forgot to say, this part of the slides I have borrowed and adapted from a friend, Deb Ellis, who did a talk for us 2 years ago as part of this. She's a master gardener and the co-chair of the Essex County Native Plants, New Jersey Native Plant Society. So I just want to give her credit that these are mostly her slides that I've adapted, and I've added a few of my own favorites. But this is Virginia Sweetspire, full or part shade. It's flexible for soil, but avoid hot and dry. About 4 to 8 feet, beautiful fall colors. So that's why I replaced instead of burning bush, which also has a really nice fall color, and has an early kind of nectar source for butterflies. Instead of barberry and privet, and these are all deer resistant. New Jersey tea, I don't know. It depends. It depends. Like, and same with sweet pepper bush and summer sweet. That is better, but I also had one die last year just from 1 week that I was away in like that horrible heat late summer. So it does, the one does need some moisture. Inkberry holly, I just put in 2 of those this year. It seems pretty hardy and more shade in more shady area. Okay, and oops, there we go. I just planted these last year as well. I had, growing up a fence, had the climbing hydrangea, which is not invasive, but it's not native. And it was destroying the fence. It was really heavy, beautiful flowers, but it was just pulling it down. And so I decided we took that out, and instead I wanted to try this trumpet honeysuckle. Don't confuse it with trumpet vine. That's another native, but apparently it's very aggressive. So unless you want it very aggressive, this one is slower growing. But yeah, trumpet vine, I was kind of warned off that once I did some searches, and it seemed like, okay, that could really take over. But this one, it's a hummingbird favorite. It's like May through June is when it blooms, but it can also rebloom later in the summer. I haven't seen it bloom yet because I started off with small plants last year, but I got some bigger ones toward the end of the year, so I'm hoping it blooms this year. And attracts hummingbirds, and it's also a host for 2 different butterflies and moth, and deer resistant. Instead of the Callery pear, serviceberry or shadblow are my favorite, the eastern redbud. They do take a while to bloom. So when you get younger trees, they do take a few years to eventually bloom. So you just have to be patient with them. Or you can buy them from nurseries when they're older, that are already blooming. Okay, so tips for how to create and care for native habitats. 8 or more species, because you want to attract a variety, plant food for a variety of caterpillars. And you want blooms from April through October. So when the bees and the butterflies aren't here yet, but the bees are out, with different flower shapes for hummingbirds, bees, they all have different flower shapes that kind of suit them. The right plant in the right place. Natives are sometimes more flexible on light and moisture, but then also sometimes not. So just, I have some resources at the end and on the back of the sheet that I use to kind of check. Jersey Yards is my favorite, so for just checking the requirements, you can actually put in your exact requirements, like either soil type or light or moisture, and it will give you a whole list of either shrubs or trees, and so that's just what I double check. And this is protect the pollinator habitat, so I already talked about this, but leaving the leaves, get free fertilizer, mulch, and homes for insects, so people don't realize that that's actually where fireflies and moths live during the winter, is in the leaf litter. So that's why I try to rake as much into the garden beds as possible, and then put the rest on the leaf pile, or and I mulch some into the grass, but hopefully they haven't settled in there. And then leave the perennial stems standing until April. So I just did this recently. So 6 to 18 inches, you kind of vary them. You get free stakes and then home for bees. Eradicate or reduce invasive species and don't use pesticides, including mosquito and tree sprays. So even if it says organic kills. Chrysanthemum, it's organic, but it still kills all beneficial insects. So there is no organic pesticide that is safe for beneficial insects. They're just indiscriminatory. They can't tell the difference. And they will poison the insects and the birds. So gardening with natives requires less money, time, and inputs. That was written by my friend. I'm not sure I agree with the less money aspect. I'm kind of addicted to just buying plants, but in theory and time, yeah, I spend a lot of time, but it's a hobby. But in theory, they do require less. And if you plant closer together, you don't have to weed as much. You can it all kind of blends together, and you don't have to, when you have like more formal garden bed with mulch, that requires more time. So these are my 14 favorite kind of flowers, going from early spring to fall. So early spring, you have columbine, foamflower, and golden Alexander. Late spring, false indigo and foxglove beard tongue. Summer is milkweed, coneflower, purple giant hyssop, tickseed, bergamot, and bee balm, and then cardinal flower, and then asters and goldenrod. So columbine, I love. I have not had the best luck with it. I think because I have too much moisture in most of my property. It really likes dry, rocky soil. So if you've got a dry, rocky area, this is one. I've just tried it again closer near the road, thinking that it slopes down, it gets a lot of sun out there, drier, so we'll see. It has nectar for hummingbirds and butterflies, and is deer resistant, and can do shade. Okay. And this is golden Alexander. This is just starting to bloom now. Columbine is already blooming, or just coming up, depending on where you have it. But golden Alexander, mine are starting to show flowers. It will eventually get 1 to 2 feet tall.
Go back and pick another.
April through June, and sun to light shade. So I've got this in full sun, and I've also got in more shady areas, and it seems to be fine. And it's a host for the black swallowtail. So that black swallowtail is the yellow and black butterfly. And there's 2 different species. The heart-leafed one doesn't spread as much, but it's harder to find. I actually like it to spread. It's not very aggressive. It just kind of fills in, and you can move it around. And deer resistant. Most of these are all deer resistant. So, false blue indigo. This is baptisia, another early bloomer. Mine's just starting to come up, but in May it should be up and blooming. Sun to part shade. Has a long taproot, so it doesn't like to be moved. And it's a host for the silver spotted skipper and wild indigo dusky wing. Yeah, really nice color there. And this is foamflower. So you can see en masse. I wish mine spread that much and created a mass like that. But I keep planting it because I love it and figure I'll find the right spot where it just needs to be, and we'll take off. But it's a host for 5 different species of bees, and dry or moist, so it doesn't care that much, sun or part shade, and has a pretty long bloom time too, from late April through July. Mine that I have bloomed for quite a while. And this is my new favorite. I just got one of these last year, and it does spread a little bit, but I'm putting in more wherever I can because it fills a gap in the bloom time that I don't really have anything else, kind of May through June before everything for summer takes off kind of the end of June. Penstemon is the one that was there, and the bees and hummingbirds like it because they can burrow into the individual flowers, and it is good for both sun and light shade. And there's different varieties. I just got a different one at Bowman's Hill that's even more tolerant of shade, so it's like a light blue, slightly blue one. This is butterfly weed. I again have not had the right. I've not had the right luck or area for this. This is another one that needs hot and dry, so not so much moisture. So I think I just have too much moisture in my yard. So I'm trying it again out front by the road, and I just saw it starting to come up. Like it's very late to come up. So you think it's not there. Sometimes it's not, but a lot of times it's late. And it's a milkweed. So so it's a milkweed for monarchs. It's called butterfly weed. Not a great name. They're all weeds. But I know all the native plants are named weeds. But it's shorter in stature, so it's like 1 to 3 feet, and I've seen them get really large. They're bushes. I have 2 of them at the Wysong Park, so I'm hoping they come back and get bigger and bushier there. But yeah, it says it can be hard to establish, so I agree with that. But anyway, I keep trying because it is a really nice plant for monarchs. The one that's easier, I find, is swamp milkweed. Even though it says swamp, it tolerates wet and dry, so it's not as fussy about where it is. Mostly sun, but it says it can take part shade. And again, deer resistant. Deer, it's like toxic to deer, so they actually will not touch it. So it's deer proof, not even deer resistant. And purple coneflower, not technically deer resistant, but I really haven't had anything decimated. Like I've had like a few nibbles, and then sometimes they rebloom later. If you want, you can spray with like liquid fence or something like that at certain periods, and if you have a big deer problem and you want coneflowers. But for the most part, I don't have a problem with them. This is the straight species, the Echinacea purpura. There are a ton of cultivars, different colors. I have a couple before I realized I wanted more straight species. Again, they're not as bad, so if you can only find cultivars, that's probably fine. And goldfinches love the seed, so another reason to not do any fall cleanup and leave everything standing till the spring is the goldfinches will come in and pick up the dead seed heads and disperse it for you. So like I have tons of little baby, coneflowers that you have too much in one area, I just move it somewhere else, or give them to your friends. And so yeah, that's nature's bird feeders, just the coneflowers and other ones. All right, so wild bergamot. There are again tons of cultivars with this. I have one. I think I got it at the Morristown Garden Club a few years ago. It just said pink bee balm. So it is a cultivar that's spread and gone crazy. I'm now trying to plant more of the straight species. The one up here, that is wild bergamot, and the red one is scarlet bee balm. So those are the 2 straight species. Sun to light shade, so I'm actually trying some of the scarlet bee balm in more of a light shade area and see if it works. And moist, but also tolerates drought. It's a nectar plant. It's basically my hummingbird feeder. I don't do hummingbird feeding other than just having a big area of bee balm, because yeah, the hummingbirds just can't get enough. It says it attracts bees and butterflies as well too, but I don't see them as much as the hummingbirds on the bee balm. And deer resistant, because it's in the mint family, so the deer won't touch it. Oops. And this one I just planted last year. Again, is deer resistant because it's in the licorice family. So purple giant hyssop, or there's some other native varieties as well. Full to partial sun, I planted in kind of a shadier area as well as full sun. And it is an excellent nectar plant as well. So yeah, that's supposed to be really good. And cardinal flower, I almost gave up on because I had one year and it didn't come back, and I thought it wasn't moist enough. It does like a lot of moisture. But then the next year I found what I thought were sundrop seedlings, but they were actually cardinal flower. And so without knowing, I just spread them around to other parts of the yard, and then I had all these cardinal flowers. So I'm hoping I just keep having more of them and they all come back. But it's again another hummingbird plant because of the shape of the flowers, and is deer resistant. So part shade to full sun, and it blooms later. And then goldenrod. This is known as, like the oak tree, it's known as a keystone species. So, because according to Doug Tellamy, it supports over 121 species of caterpillars, so quite a lot, rather than just one. And there's lots of different varieties of goldenrod. So there's some that spread a lot, like the Maine goldenrod. I didn't get that one. There's some that spread not that much. And there's others, like this one is wreath goldenrod, that is really good for actually part shade. So there's some for full sun, and then that's actually my favorite one. And it takes full sun as well. So it spreads very slowly, so I like that one. Showy goldenrod, I haven't had as much luck with. We actually planted that one at Wysong, but I got plugs of it a couple years ago, and it didn't really do much. So maybe it will eventually, but Anyway, so I keep experimenting. Okay. And then either New England or New York aster. There are a ton of aster species, so 112 species of caterpillars for any of the aster species. These are just two of the ones I've chosen to talk about here, but there's the wood aster, there's like the white or blue ones, there's another one like heartleaf aster, so there's just a ton of different types of asters. Moist to dry, sun to part sun, and late blooming.
But not resistant to deer.
They are actually. I don't know why it's not on that one. That's why. Maybe someone, I don't know if it was a deer or a bunny, but someone nibbled like one of my asters once. So yeah, they're not completely deer resistant. That's right, when they're young. But I have so many of them that, I don't know. It's like I just keep, some of them plant themselves. Some got nibbled, but not too much. They came back enough. Yeah, even at the Wysong Park where we had the New England aster, I think they did get nibbled a little bit, and then we're fine, and rebloom. So yeah, not completely deer resistant, but still fine. Coreopsis is, there's a lot of different varieties, or Tixie. There's a lot of cultivars. They're not all bad either. My favorite is lance leaf Coreopsis, which is the one in the picture. It's really big. Blooms and is deer resistant. All right, so finally, where to buy? So I mentioned the Great Swamp Native Plant Sale, only plugs. The next sale coming up the same day for pickup, but in the morning is the New Jersey Audubon Plant Sale. That's at the Sherman Hoffman Audubon Center in Bernardsville. And actually the same day, I didn't put it on here because it's not exclusively native, but the Cross Estate is also having their plant sale. And you have to know that it's native or ask someone because they don't have a section, but they do have a lot. They have Virginia bluebells, they have wood poppy. I got a Dutchman's breeches there last year. They actually had a native delphinium, so they have some interesting stuff, but it's not all native, so you have to kind of like either ask someone. They have some very knowledgeable people there, or just kind of know what you're looking for. And then exclusively native mail order or local pickup places. I mentioned Toadshade already. Wild Ridge is in Alpha, that's near Phillipsburg, so again, about like an hour. But they have, if you don't want to get it mailed to you and pay shipping, you can do a curbside pickup there. It's a nice drive out there. Pinelands Direct is the only one I haven't bought from. They're down in the Pinelands, so it's a bit more of a trek. You have to pick up larger pots. They do ship plugs. Pollination is where I've gone in addition to the Great Swamp Native Plant Sale to buy plugs. So plugs are just an easy way if you have like a big area you want to fill, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on like a $10 a plant each. Like I said, you can get 5 plugs for like $15 because they're like $3 or $4 each. And so like I had a big area where I got rid of an invasive weed, and so I bought a bunch of plugs to kind of fill in that area, and they'll just.
What is a plug?
So it's about like 3 inches wide, but it's deep. It's got deep roots. So they call them landscape plugs. So it's basically just a smaller plant, smaller than a normal gallon perennial. So it's just a more economical way to buy plants. They do take longer to establish. Some won't flower the first year. Some will. It just depends. But it's just especially if you have larger areas you want to plant and you don't want to spend the money for big plants. I kind of vary them. Like I had an area out front where I put a lot of plugs, but then I didn't want to not have blooms that first year, so I bought a few gallon perennials to kind of supplement and shrubs behind, so then the plugs kind of filled in. And a lot of the plugs did great, so it just depends on the plug, which one is going to like flower that first year. And then with native plants, like there's a saying, they say like the first year they sleep, the next year they creep, and the third year they leap. That's kind of like the saying for native plants, even with gallon perennials, like, is that they just take longer to establish, but then they can kind of just go. Like I am now, I had, not from plugs, but from the Cross Estate, I actually got some Virginia bluebells, even like 5 years ago. And, like I've seen fields of bluebells at Bowman's Hill. They have a whole like area filled with bluebells. Wow, how long does it take for that to happen? Mine eventually got bigger, but didn't really spread. Now this year, I am finding little seedlings everywhere. and I found them in the grass. And so I was, like earlier today, I was like digging them out from the grass so I could like put them other places so they wouldn't get mowed later. So it just, some of them take longer to establish than others, but others are great from like year one. Like they just, it
So
just
bluebells
depends on-
are native. then.
Bluebells are native.
I have
yes.
some in my yard.
Yes, yes. One of my favorite early spring, it's spring ephemeral, so it'll completely die away and you'll never know it was there. So if you do have, you should like plant other things around it, so you don't have like a bare area later. But yeah, bluebells are native. And then the native retail nurseries, unfortunately there's not any near here, they're all about an hour drive. But like I said, Gino's and Bowman's Hill are 10 minutes from each other. Bowman's Hill is a preserve, so you have to pay to go in or become a member. Gino's is a retail nursery. That's where we got all the plants for Wysong, so it's a great place. And Edge of the Woods is the only one I haven't been to. It's a little further away, but that's in Pennsylvania. And I plan to go. Since I work in Easton, I really need to go over there sometime, but I just never got over there. And to learn more, these are in the brochure. Jersey Yards, I've mentioned, they actually have a planning tool on their page as well, where you can like basically look at your yard and use like a design tool to map it out. I haven't tried it, but I saw a webinar of someone doing that. But I basically use them for their database. So like I said, you can filter down by your specific needs, and that's my favorite database to just figure out, okay, will this work here? New Jersey Native Plant Society has a lot of great lists. I find their site a little harder to navigate in terms of their lists, but they do have a lot of good information. They have those monthly webinars, and they have like a yearly conference as well. The National Wildlife Federation also sells plants, so that's a mail order, but their Garden for Wildlife page is national, and they sell plants. And then the Going Native brochure, that's a northern New Jersey brochure, so that was done by Barnegat Bay and Jersey Yards a few years ago, and so that's a good resource. IDing is really important for, like, I had some new weeds in my yard this year that I didn't know what they were. I was like, oh, this is a pretty little flower. I bet you're not native. And no, it wasn't. I had bittersweet in my yard this year, which I'd never seen before. But apparently it's from the mustard family, and the seeds just explode and go everywhere. So I've now dug it up, I think, hopefully before it's gone to seed, so it doesn't keep spreading. But Plant ID is free, so there are paid ones that some people say are better, but I find that one really does the job. Doug Talmy, search his YouTube channel. Like, he is a wealth of information and resources. You can read his books. His newest one is Nature's Best Hope. He has a book on oaks as well. And his website is Homegrown National Park. That's free. You can just, again, if you're certifying, you can just register your yard, and then he's trying to grow this Homegrown National Park movement. And then finally, that is the website to certify, so it's nwf.org/certify. And you can get a sign and various different kinds of signs if you want, and contribute to the larger movement to certify our towns as habitat. All right. That is all. All right. Thank goodness. I'm happy to take questions.
I have a question about, there's gonna be like a plant sale this Saturday over by Harmony Brookside?
That is the sharing project. They're not, they do have some plants